I'm very disgusted that this is a murder investigation.
Was there any consideration at any time given to taking her to the hospital?
Not at all. I just trusted in God the whole time.
I gave my little girl what she wanted, and I expect God to look after her.
The cult who killed in the name of God.
The police, government, are trying to pin us for murdering Elizabeth, which we didn't do because we're Christians and, burn people, obviously.
8-year-old Elizabeth Struhs left to die by her parents, her brother, and 12 other members of their cult church who thought God would heal her of her diabetes.
It wasn't an easy decision to do what Elizabeth wanted, but believing in God, I believe He would have healed it as well, and will. So.
Do you think an 8-year-old is capable of making that decision?
Yes, she was a very strong little lady, and this is what she wanted. I did this for my baby girl.
It upsets me, but I'm not losing my faith in God. I'm not ever going to think He's failed. He can still bring her back, doesn't matter where her body is.
For the last 3 years, we've been covering the story of Elizabeth Struhs, unravelling the last traumatic years of her life when the 8-year-old was taken off her diabetes medication by her parents and their cult, who believed God would heal her. It was a years-long police investigation that led to one of the largest and more bizarre trials in Australian history.
They do believe so hard that I feel like have lost all kinds of common sense.
I thought their beliefs were crazy.
Elizabeth Struhs was your typical 8-year-old girl. She loved roses, her favourite colours, pink and purple.
She was just a young, bubbly, energetic soul that was always happy and pure at heart.
So how did it come to this? Her parents, Kerry and Jason, now charged with her murder, and their cult-like church under the spotlight. Hi Brendan, my name's Pippa, I'm from A Current Affair. We just wanted to ask you some questions about your church. Is it a cult?
They believe that every other religion is second and wrong.
Tonight, for the first time, we hear from the person who knows what it was like on the inside, Elizabeth's own sister, who fled when she was 16.
To leave all of my brothers and sisters behind was probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do.
Jade Struhs is the oldest of the 8 Struhs children. Her baby photos paint a picture of an everyday family, but as she grew up, things started to change.
At what age did religion start to play a part in your life growing up?
I was 6 when my mum became involved with the church.
Now 23, Jade says her mother, Kerry, originally took her and her siblings to a mainstream church in Toowoomba, west of Brisbane. That's until the Struhs and another family, the Stevenses, with their 7 children, decided to break away.
All we got told was that that the church that we were going to was corrupt, and it wasn't quite fulfilling the whole religion.
From then on, Jade says church as such was held at the Stevens family home in Toowoomba. From the outside, you can hear the singing. It's believed the patriarch of the Stevens family, Brendan, is the leader of the group.
We would refer to ourselves as the saints.
Jade says the rules became more strict. Christmas was no longer celebrated, medical intervention wasn't allowed, and their one duty in life was to serve God. Something Jade struggled with as she got older and discovered her own sexuality.
When I told my mother that I was a lesbian and that I didn't see eye to eye on her beliefs, it was straight away. I had Brendan at the doorstep. I was taken to the house. We sat down for hours and I had reading me scriptures and saying how, an abomination it was.
Jade then made the tough decision to leave her family, knowing she was no longer accepted.
My mother definitely didn't appreciate having me in her presence.
But as Jade started her new life, the Saints' faith grew stronger.
They're extreme, they're small, controlled.
They tried to recruit more people, including 19-year-old David, as we'll call him, who was just in high school at the time.
I believe that they were the only true Christians because they could speak in tongues.
He went along to church at the Stevens house 3 times, where Kerry Struhs and her children also were.
Mr. Stevens was talking about how although wives should submit to their husbands and then the husbands submit to God.
By then, David says the group was meeting 3 times a week, always led by Brendan Stevens.
I clashed with Mr. Stevens a little bit, just on some of his beliefs, and I think he got frustrated that I was questioning most things he was saying.
David decided not to go back, but while the Saints group stayed small, their beliefs grew.
No medical intervention was very early on. It was God heals.
Jade became concerned about that belief in 2019 after a shock call from her father, Jason.
He's like, hey, Elizabeth's in a coma. I'm about to get on a helicopter to the Royal Children's Hospital.
Elizabeth was airlifted here after being taken to her local hospital, unconscious and needing resuscitation. It was here Elizabeth was diagnosed as a type 1 diabetic. She remained in hospital for a month while she was taught how to self-administer insulin daily.
I found out that she told everyone at school that she wanted to be a doctor to help other kids with diabetes.
This photo is from the last time Jade saw her family, taken just over 12 months ago. Elizabeth perched on her dad's lap. But just 12 months later, Elizabeth was dead, her parents charged with her murder, torture and failing to provide the necessities of life, alleged to have withheld her insulin for at least 5 days before she died.
It's something you can't really comprehend. It doesn't make any sense.
But Kerry and Jason Struhs allegedly weren't home alone at the time of Elizabeth's death. Police will allege there were around 20 members of their church group also here. It's alleged they were singing, praying and chanting from the Friday morning right until the Saturday evening when Jason finally called police.
Not surprised. Horrified.
Neighbour John Burns snapped this photo from his house as police filled the quiet street. The group pictured out the front of the Struhs house, guitar in hand.
We can hear music going on and it sounded like guitars and then just singing.
John, who has a daughter the same age as Elizabeth, said they always kept to themselves and never wanted to play.
We had the ambulance drivers out the front talking to police and one of them seemed really distraught.
In the days following Elizabeth's death, the Stevenses and a third family involved in the church were seen at the Struhs home.
Are you part of Kerry and Jason's church group?
We caught up with leader Brendan Stevens in the days following, who was with other church members who refused to answer questions.
Do you refer to yourself as the Saints? What about Elizabeth Struhs? What happened to her? Is there anything you want to say?
We do not give permission for any of this footage to be used for any purpose.
We don't need your permission.
Quickly fleeing back to their home.
Do you have anything to say?
Now Jade is fighting to be able to raise her youngest siblings, 5 children aged between 3 and 16.
I want to be able to give them the life they deserve and really get them away from this.
They've started a fundraiser to provide the essentials. Jade's got the support of her grandparents too, including Jason's parents, Rick and Rosemary.
How does it feel to know your son has been charged with this?
Well, don't know. I'm going to answer that.
They too hadn't seen their grandchildren in years. They say pushed away by Kerry.
To her, we were bad people because we didn't believe.
Do you still believe in a lot of the, I guess, Christian beliefs that you would have grown up with?
No, I think I came to the conclusion that even if it was true, I don't want to be part of that.
Jade was able to give her sister the send-off she wanted after she says her parents from jail and her 19-year-old brother refused to hold any type of funeral.
She would have been 9 yesterday. It was her birthday, so yeah.
I'm so sorry.
We all tried to celebrate it in some sort of way.
Jade wants people to know Elizabeth's name and beaming smile and hope it never happens again.
But yeah, I wished I could have been closer to have some sort of handedness to help not make this happen.
We have an update now on a story we brought you earlier this year. A further 12 people have now been charged with the murder of 8-year-old Elizabeth Struhs after a police raid this morning. Elizabeth, who was a diabetic, died in January. Police allege Elizabeth's family and 2 other families from their religious group withheld her insulin over a period of 6 days. The cult-like group allegedly believed God would heal her. Police claim they sang and prayed around Elizabeth after she died instead of calling for help. Elizabeth's parents were charged in January with her murder, torture and failing to provide the necessities of life. Before dawn today, police raided a Toowoomba home where they found the remaining group members. 14 people are now charged over Elizabeth's death. They will front court tomorrow.
But first, 8-year-old Elizabeth Struhs had a very treatable condition, diabetes. But it's alleged her parents, along with their hardline religious group, stopped her medication, believing God would heal her. Now the congregation is on trial for her murder and manslaughter, a trial so big they've had to remodel the courthouse to accommodate the 14 defendants. Reporter Pippa Bradshaw's been covering this story from the beginning and was inside that courtroom today, and she joins me now. Pippa, this is a trial like no other. What was the mood there in the courtroom today?
Well, Layla, usually the mood inside a murder trial is very quiet and still. But today we saw something that I've never experienced before. It started with the 14 accused walking into the courtroom dressed in their prison tracksuits. Now, the men and the women have been separated at different prisons, so this was a family reunion of sort. It was husband and wives seeing each other for the first time in a couple of months, as well as their children. One of the accused, Keita Martin, turned around to her family, who was in the gallery, and smiled and waved at them and gave them the thumbs up, saying she was okay. Now, these 14 have refused any offer of legal assistance, so they will be defending themselves against these awful charges of killing Elizabeth Struhs.
So what can we expect in the coming months?
So, Layla, we heard from the prosecution today that they are expecting to call around 60 witnesses. The trial is slated to run for around 3 months. Now, that is quite long in comparison, but there are 14 accused, remember, and they have no legal representation. All we heard from the accused today was when they were asked to enter a plea. Now, they all refused to enter a plea, interestingly, saying no plea. The judge wrote that down as not guilty, and ultimately he will be the one to decide if they are guilty or not. Elizabeth Struhs was just 8 years old. She had a beaming smile and big dreams. Her big sister Jade remembering her joyful little sister.
I found out that she told everyone at school that she wanted to be a doctor to help other kids with diabetes.
In this last known photo of Elizabeth, she was perched on her dad's lap, a safe place for any 8-year-old. But Elizabeth's parents, along with 12 members of their cult-like religious group, are accused of killing her. Hi Brendan, my name's Pippa, I'm from A Current Affair. We just wanted to ask you some questions about your church. It's alleged they withheld her insulin medication, believing God would heal her. What about Elizabeth Struhs? What happened to her?
It's something you can't really comprehend. It doesn't make any sense.
I have a warrant that's been issued under the Police Powers and Responsibilities Act to search this dwelling in relation to property, okay?
No placement under arrest for murder.
The group called themselves the Saints. Leader Brendan Stevens and Elizabeth's father Jason Struhs are charged with murder. Elizabeth's mum Kerry and her brother are among the 12 other congregation members charged with manslaughter. Today's trial is unprecedented. 14 accused in one go. They've refused any offer of legal help, instead choosing to represent themselves. As a result, the court had to be remodelled. 2 new rows of desks brought in with computer screens and microphones for them to today hear the opening remarks for what is expected to be a 3-month trial. Stretched across the width of the court, 14 defendants dressed in prison clothing. In her opening remarks, Crown Prosecutor Caroline Marco told the court Elizabeth's parents had a duty imposed on them to care for her and deliver her insulin. Instead, Marco told the court they withdrew it completely from her. From that point, visible to all who saw her, she was in a state of decline from which she would not recover. She detailed allegations as to how Elizabeth's parents and the 12 other congregation members sat by as Elizabeth became critically ill, choosing to sing and pray instead of calling for help. The court hearing Elizabeth's death occurred just 3 weeks after her mother was released from prison for previously failing to provide the necessities of life when Elizabeth was diagnosed a diabetic. Some of the accused sat with Bibles on their desks and laughed as the evidence to come was detailed. A judge alone will decide if the Saints are now responsible for the death of 8-year-old Elizabeth Struhs.
She was just a young, bubbly, energetic soul.
This is the last family photo ever taken with Elizabeth Struhs. Perched on her father's lap, the 8-year-old had big dreams of wanting to help others. Jade Struhs is the oldest of the 8 Struhs children.
She wanted to be a doctor to help other kids with diabetes.
Now her parents will stand trial for her murder.
They believe that every other religion is second and wrong.
Elizabeth was diagnosed as a diabetic in mid-2019. She was reliant on daily insulin. But in January this year, police allege her parents, along with 12 others from the family's religious sect, intentionally stopped Elizabeth's life-saving medication, leading to a near week-long painful death. Kerry and Jason Struhs, along with members of the Stevens and Schoenfish families, are accused of being part of a cult-like church in Toowoomba, referring to themselves as the Saints. The court heard that the religious sect believed in the healing power of God and shunning medical intervention. Now 14 members of the group are charged with Elizabeth's murder. The court process for the 14 accused has been slow and tedious. So far, all have refused any legal assistance, choosing instead to represent themselves. What further complicates the matter is one of the accused, Samantha Schoenfish, is pregnant and refusing all medical help while in prison. Elizabeth's father, Jason, was the first to front court for a committal hearing. The police prosecutor telling the court Mr. Struhs had the requisite knowledge to know that the withholding of diabetic treatment would result in pain and suffering to Elizabeth. It's alleged Elizabeth's insulin was stopped on January 3 before she died on January 7. Mr. Struhs intentionally withheld the insulin. More than 100 statements from witnesses, CCTV, police body camera vision and medical reports form the brief of evidence detailing how the group allegedly prayed over Elizabeth rather than seek help. Magistrate Claire Kelly had the task of looking through it all to decide if Mr. Struhs would stand trial, telling the court The statement by Mr. Struhs goes into a significant level of detail about his thought processes and ultimately the basis for the decision he took to stop providing the life-saving medication to Elizabeth. It is contended that Mr. Struhs failed to provide the insulin to Elizabeth. He clearly knew that it was probable death would result from him ceasing to administer insulin to Elizabeth.
Jason Struhs is the first of the 14 accused of Elizabeth's murder to show any emotion in court. He sat with his head in his hands and cried as he was officially committed to stand trial over his daughter's death. Wife and co-accused Kerry Struhs sat emotionless in a separate hearing. The court heard she actively supported and encouraged the cessation of Elizabeth's insulin. Magistrate Kay Phillipson telling the court the defendant's own statement goes into detail about her involvement in the religious group. She goes into detail about not wanting to be part of the medications given to Elizabeth. Andrea Stevens and her mother Loretta Stevens also fronted court. Facing murder charges, the court heard they aided Elizabeth's parents in stopping the insulin, showing reckless indifference to human life. All three will now face trial for murder over a little life taken far too soon.
It was God's will. That's how the parents of little Elizabeth Struhs defended her death. Part of a religious cult, her mother, father and 12 other members denied the 8-year-old life-saving medication, then watched on as she took her final breaths. Today was Judgment Day, as we can finally show you the police interviews.
We obviously believe in God, as you can tell, and we expect him to bring him back, and that's what happened. Nothing else.
The words of a father who just killed his daughter.
Nothing to hide. Yeah.
8-year-old Elizabeth Struhs left to die by the very people she trusted the most.
We're at peace with what was happening.
Her family and their cult-like church group guilty of killing her.
God can't fail. And I don't believe he has failed here. And everyone will still yet see some great miraculous thing happen.
Now, for the first time, the police interviews of those involved, their wild beliefs and preaching practices.
Do you have any regret at all?
Is there a friend or a relative that you wish to contact to be present during questioning?
You've locked up all my friends.
This is where this story started more than 3 years ago. It's an unassuming suburban street here in Toowoomba, 2 hours west of Brisbane. But inside this home is where Elizabeth Struhs was left to die. It would lead to a trial of unprecedented proportions. 14 accused who would choose to represent themselves, openly laughing in court and scoffing at the suggestion that they'd done anything wrong inside this house.
Was there any consideration at any time given to taking her to the hospital?
Not at all. I just trusted in God the whole time.
It was January 2022. Elizabeth Struhs was just days away from her 9th birthday. In her young life, she'd already overcome so much, almost dying 18 months prior when she was diagnosed with diabetes.
He's like, hey, Elizabeth's in a coma. I'm about to get on a helicopter to the Royal Children's Hospital.
Elizabeth was in hospital for a month, where she was taught to self-administer the insulin she would now need to survive every day.
I found out that she told everyone at school that she wanted to be a doctor to help other kids with diabetes.
Jade Struhs is Elizabeth's oldest sister, who removed herself from her family and their church over its extreme views. In 2022, she told A Current Affair how she was treated when she discovered her own sexuality.
When I told my mother that I was a lesbian and that I didn't see eye to eye on her beliefs. It was straight away. I had Brendan at the doorstep. I was taken to the house. We sat down for hours, and I had reading me scriptures and saying how, an abomination it was.
After a 2020 diagnosis, Elizabeth's parents, Kerry and Jason, were charged with failing to provide the necessities of life. Jason had rushed Elizabeth to hospital. He pleaded guilty and showed extreme remorse. But Kerry doubled down on her faith, telling the police she didn't take Elizabeth to hospital because God would look after this. She was sentenced to 18 months jail, but got parole after just 5 months. 3 weeks after her release from jail, Elizabeth was dead.
So would it be safe to say that essentially you've done the same thing again here? In the sense that so what you got sent to prison for the first time, you've repeated those actions?
Yeah, I just trusted in God the whole time.
It was during her time in jail, Elizabeth's father, Jason, fell into the cult.
Jason, because you've agreed that you want to get baptised in the name of God, because it's right, I'm now going to baptise you in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit.
This video shows him being baptised into the cult by Brendan in the backyard of the Stevens family home.
Praise the Lord God. Hallelujah. Thank you, Father. Blessed Jesus. Glory be to God.
The saints surrounding him and singing as he gets out of the water.
Give them a towel.
During the trial for Elizabeth's murder and manslaughter, the court watched hours of police interviews with all the cult members. They call themselves the Saints, made up of the Struhs family, including father Jason Struhs, who had only joined the cult while his wife was in jail, the Stevens family, including leader Brendan Stevens, Lachlan and Samantha Schoenfish, and Keita Martin.
I cannot tell you how it's going to happen, but I know that it's going to happen.
Elizabeth's brother Zach refused to answer questions, but proclaimed his faith that Elizabeth was not in fact dead.
If it turns out that this goes prolonged and endless possibilities of if someone gets convicted, whatever happens, we know that if we haven't seen the resurrection of Elizabeth at that time, we know there's more to come.
In the days before her death, the saints gathered at the Struhs family home as Elizabeth's insulin was stopped. The 14 of them choosing to sing, pray and dance for 24 hours after she died before calling emergency services. As the police start their interview with Therese Stevens at the scene, you can still hear them singing.
No one said she's dead. It was more like she sleeps now because we believe that it is only sleep. And at some point, God will rise her again in this lifetime.
Yep.
Because that's a promise. And then he is coming back again.
Telling police why Elizabeth's life-saving insulin was stopped.
You can't be a hypocrite. You can't say I believe in the healing power of God and also giving her insulin. So it's like one way or the other. Do you believe it or not?
Do you have any comment about your significant role in Elizabeth's death?
No, because she's not dead to us.
It was Elizabeth's father, Jason, who took on the responsibility of administering her insulin. But he claims it was a joint decision to stop the life-saving drug.
It wasn't an easy decision to do what Elizabeth wanted, but believing in God, I believe he would have healed it as well, and will. So.
Do you think an 8-year-old is capable of making that decision?
Yes, almost. She was a very strong little lady, and this is what she wanted. I did this for my baby girl.
It would have been 5 days of hell for Elizabeth, her body slowly shutting down, her organs going into failure, as her parents, brother and their church friends stood by.
All I can really remember, because we were praying and just doing things with the vision of God intervening. She was getting worse and worse, and by Thursday,
She was obviously very sick, and then Friday morning she stopped breathing.
Despite her daughter dying in front of her, Kerry still refused to believe they'd broken the law.
The perfect amount of sun hits us, the amount of oxygen that we have to breathe, the temperatures, everything's perfect, so how can he not bring back or heal a body that he has made?
This, the only hint of emotion from the mother of 8 in her near 2-hour police interview.
It upsets me, but I'm not losing my faith in God. I'm not ever going to think he's failed. He can still bring her back, doesn't matter where her body is.
Before their arrest, a righteous Brendan Stevens refused to answer our questions.
In what religion does it say don't get medical help for a little girl who has a very treatable illness? You guys were all there at the house when she died. Is there anything you want to say?
We do not give permission for any of this footage to be used
We
for
don't
any
need your
purpose.
permission.
Motivated by political powers to pursue the church and say that people are not entitled to believe in God.
During his police interview, he sat with his arms crossed. At times, he refused to answer questions, instead choosing to sit in silence for minutes.
I never impose my faith on any. One can't impose faith.
Educate.
If you had any education at all yourself, you would understand that one can't impose faith.
Ultimately, a judge found the 14 responsible for the death of Elizabeth Struhs. Her father Jason and cult leader Brendan Stevens were found not guilty of murder, but all were guilty of manslaughter. A brave Jade speaking with the media outside court about her sister, who should have started high school today.
It's been a long and hard 3 years. Not a moment has gone by that I haven't thought about my little sister Elizabeth. I think the court made the right decision, and I'm relieved that those responsible were found guilty for their actions. Although we had a good outcome today, I have to acknowledge the system failed to protect Elizabeth in the first place. We are only here today because more wasn't done sooner to protect her or remove her from an incredibly unsafe situation in her own home.
In Toowoomba, the town now known for the horror death, shock.
I think they should go to jail for as long as they can, you can't do that to a kid. They can't decide for themselves that they need that sort of care.
My wife's diabetic, so I can understand the repercussions of that. There's got to be some culpability there.
I think it's horrific what happened to this poor child.
Christine used to cheerlead with Lachlan and Samantha Schoenfish.
It's still heartbreaking to think of it because just knowing them from the other side of it to now is, it's completely different.
The police, government, are trying to pin us for murdering Elizabeth, which we didn't do because we're Christians and you don't murder people, obviously.
But in the eyes of the law, they are now responsible for her death.
I'm very disgusted that this is a murder investigation, and all of those involved will be judged based on what's in their heart and what they've heard today from all the witnesses that you've spoken to. And my job here is done, and however further I am taken, I will do that gladly, and I'm not judged of this world.
Brendan, why did you let this happen?
It wasn't me that let it happen, and she herself did not want the medical attention.
She's an 8-year-old girl, Brendan.
That is right.
She's not in a position to make that decision.
She passed because she just trusted in God, and the Lord allowed her to pass.
I gave my little girl what she wanted, and I expect God to look after her.
Cameron's loving son is now a convicted killer. Lachlan joined a religious cult that withheld life-saving medication from an 8-year-old girl, then watched her die. He's still delusional, believing God will bring her back. What scares his father is how quickly he was brainwashed.
Please don't get involved. Run away screaming.
Yeah, I can see why you're asking these questions. It's obviously to try and implicate us all, but we don't care.
We didn't realise it could go so bad so quick.
The sins of a son.
How could someone be just this, totally loving, beautiful son and then just change into this raving, lunatic monster sort of a person.
Now Cameron's son, Lachlan Schoenfisch, and his cult are convicted killers.
Whenever I see the pictures of Elizabeth and hear talk about her, I go, what a waste, what unnecessary suffering and death.
Elizabeth Struhs was just 8 years old when the cult her parents belonged to decided to stop her insulin, believing God would heal her. The diabetic suffered for 5 days as the group watched on, praying and singing as Elizabeth took her last breaths. Last week, all 14 were found guilty of manslaughter. Among them, Lachlan Schoenfisch and his wife Samantha.
He thought he was invincible.
Absolutely.
Now Lachlan's father, Cameron, is speaking out, desperate to warn others just how quickly it happened.
I guess we always thought we had an almost ideal family.
Lachlan is the middle child of 3 for Cameron and his wife. They grew up in a Christian home. Lachlan was an engineer who loved musical theatre. That's where he'd meet his wife Samantha. They even did cheerleading together. Then they'd marry. Sam was a hairdresser. Lachlan worked for a Toowoomba engineering firm.
And who did he work with there?
Well, he had worked there for quite some years, and in the front office there was a couple of sisters who he sometimes would laughingly refer to as the weird sisters.
And we now know that they were 2 of the Stevens girls, weren't they?
That's right.
Cult members and sisters, Acacia and Camellia Stevens, convinced Lachlan and Sam, who attended a local church, to come to their home church instead. And that's when their views and behaviour started to change.
They would never purchase anything from a chemist shop again. There'd be no medicines, no vaccines.
Did that concern you?
We were terrified, and I said to Lachlan, I said, mate, I've been watching that stuff all my life. I've seen people making those claims all my life. And I said, people espouse these beliefs, it always ends badly.
It was mid-2021 when Lachlan and Samantha first came to church here at the Stevens home. Within a matter of weeks, they'd cut off all their family. Cameron says he tried to get through to his son and warn him, but claims he was under coercive control.
Said Lachlan, I said, when all this stuff plays out you're involved in, when it comes to its natural conclusion and everything goes to pot and all goes pear-shaped and it's all a disaster and you don't know which way to turn or where to go or who to trust, I said, just remember that Mummy and I love you and you'll always be our boy, and there's always home here for you because we're your parents and we love you and we'll look after you.
But just months later, Elizabeth would be found dead in her home, her parents arrested, the remaining cult members charged 6 months later, arrested at Lachlan and Sam's home.
The time now is 6:37 on the 5th of July 2022. We're now placing you under arrest for murder.
During his police interview, Lachlan is asked about his father.
Your own father, who only wants to love and protect you, will warn you about the teachings of Brendan Stevens. In November 2021.
But Lachlan was more interested in preaching to the detectives.
We're all going to die the same, and then it's going to come to God's judgment, and we're going to be the ones on the right side of history.
The police did an interview with Lachlan, which was played during the trial. Have you seen that video?
No, I haven't, Pippa. No, we want to remember Lachlan, how he was. We don't want to think of him how he's become because, we may never see him again.
Are you just gobsmacked still at how quickly this happened?
Absolutely.
How quickly they got sucked in?
It's just, I just shake my head and go, why didn't I intervene? And then I realised that by the time we knew that we needed to intervene or try to intervene, they were already gone.
Do you forgive him for what he did?
They say, to err is human, to forgive divine. And I'm not divine. I might sound a bit hard. On one level, yeah, I do forgive him, but on another level I go, well, if someone harms you, you can forgive them. But if they harm a poor little 8-year-old defenceless girl, I don't have much forgiveness for that.
She's the 8-year-old girl who should still be alive.
Elizabeth Struhs died a slow and painful death, failed by her parents, their cult and the system. Those who should have protected her were blinded by their faith, stopping her diabetes medication and leaving her to die. They believed God would heal her and then resurrect her. Today they learned their fate.
Was there any consideration at any time given to taking her to the hospital?
Not at all. I just trusted in God the whole time.
I gave my little girl what she wanted, and I expect God to look after her.
The cult who killed in the name of God.
The police, government, are trying to pin us for murdering Elizabeth, which we didn't do because we're Christians and we don't murder people, obviously.
8-year-old Elizabeth Struhs left to die by her parents, her brother and 12 other members of their cult church who thought God would heal her of her diabetes.
It wasn't an easy decision to do what Elizabeth wanted, but believing in God, I believe He would have healed it as well, and will. So.
Do you think an 8-year-old is capable of making that decision?
This one was. She was a very strong little lady, and this is what she wanted. I did this for my baby girl.
It upsets me, but I'm not losing my faith in God. I'm not ever going to think He's failed. He can still bring her back, doesn't matter where her body is.
Cult leader Brendan Stevens accusing the justice system of religious persecution.
Motivated by political powers to pursue the church and say that people are not entitled to believe in God.
Now they're convicted killers, all 14 guilty of manslaughter. Family members left to pick up the pieces.
I'm relieved that those responsible were found guilty for their actions. Although we had a good outcome today, I have to acknowledge the system failed to protect Elizabeth in the first place.
Well, Pippa Bradshaw has been covering this tragedy from the very start back in 2022 and she joins me now. Pippa, this is a little girl, 8-year-old Elizabeth, who died from something so treatable, diabetes, and her parents should have protected her. How long will they spend behind bars?
Deb, Kerry and Jason Struhs were today sentenced to more than 14 years for the manslaughter of their daughter. They will have to serve 80% of that because the judge ruled that it was an aggravated offence. Now, this was not the first time that they failed their daughter. We know in 2019, when Elizabeth was diagnosed as a diabetic, her parents were charged with failing to provide the necessities of life because they waited too long to take her to hospital then. 2.5 years on, in 2022, they repeated those actions and it had fatal consequences. Today in court, the judge said that Elizabeth's death was entirely preventable and profoundly disturbing. He said they gambled with a child's life because of their extreme religious reviews. He said their prospects of rehab were bleak and he feared that if they had the opportunity, they would do it again. Kerry, Elizabeth's mother, when she was sentenced today, as she was walking out of the courtroom, she smiled and waved at her fellow cult members.
It's hard to comprehend. And what about the cult leader? Because he's still adamant that he's done nothing wrong and that he would do it all again.
Yeah, that's right. Brendan Stevens, he was the one who really encouraged everyone, particularly Elizabeth's dad, Jason Struhs, because we know that he only joined the cult months before Elizabeth's death. The judge said that Brendan was relentless in his pursuit of healing Elizabeth with these religious views. He said that even when Jason cracked in the days before his daughter's death, Brendan said, no, you just need to pray more. We're not going to take her to hospital. It's all fine. Just pray more. The judge said, had he not done that, Elizabeth may still be alive today. Now, Brendan received a 13-year sentence. He also has to serve 80% of that. And the judge gave a pretty stern warning in his sentencing. He said that Brendan was a highly manipulative individual and that authorities should keep that in mind when considering if he should be released.
And the rest of the cult? Because it's quite unusual for this many people to be found guilty of manslaughter.
Yeah, that's right, Deb. This is one of the largest mass trials in Australian history. The remaining 11 cult members, which included Elizabeth's adult brother, they were sentenced to between 6 and 9 years in prison. Now, they only have to serve 50% of that time. So with the time already served, which is 2.5 years, two of them got sentenced to 6 years. So they will be eligible for parole in about 6 months' time. And remember, Deb, none of these people are remorseful. In fact, they've gone the complete opposite. They don't regret anything that they did.
And ultimately, this is a little girl who's been let down, who's been left to die by the cult, by her family and by authorities. Is there going to be anyone else held accountable?
Well, that is what is still to come in this saga, this case, I guess, Deb. There will be a coronial inquiry. That was announced just after the verdict last month by the state government in Queensland. We know Jade Struhs, Elizabeth's oldest sister, is also suing the state for negligence, saying they failed in taking care of Elizabeth. Jade was at court today to hear those sentences, and there are still a lot of questions that we are yet to get answers for from the Child Safety Department. Elizabeth was failed here, and there are a lot more people that need to be held accountable for that.
And we know that you will be across all of the detail as it unfolds. Pippa, thank you so much.